At EllisDon, nothing is more important than your safety. This video briefly covers EllisDon's expectations and important topics related to the construction industry. Learn more about your project-specific requirements and expectations from your supervisor and the EllisDon site team. Safety is everyone's responsibility, and you must be aware of your rights and responsibilities. Under Canadian law, every worker has 3 basic rights. 1, you have the right to know about hazards in your workplace, learn about hazards from hazard assessments, weekly toolbox talks, safety meetings, training, safety data sheets, etc. 2, you also have the right to participate in safety. You can actively contribute to meetings, inspections, and safety committees. Talk with your supervisor about how you can improve safety on the project. 3, you have the right to refuse unsafe work. If you're asked to do a task you think is unsafe, we expect you to refuse it. Talk to your supervisor about the concern to try to resolve it. If you're still not comfortable, ask the EllisDon site team for help.
Bringing together diverse perspectives encourages us to create an environment of respect, collaboration, and new ideas. EllisDon believes inclusive diversity not only enriches our day-to-day lives, but has the power to reshape our industry and is proud to lead the charge in making it a more inclusive space for everyone. Safety is a fundamentally critical priority in the construction industry, and for EllisDon, this includes the psychological safety that comes with building an environment that is both diverse and inclusive. With psychological safety comes greater engagement and innovation, which is born out of the freedom to show up authentically, to contribute, to be seen, to be heard, and importantly, to be respected for the ways and things that set each of us apart as unique. The construction industry has made meaningful and significant strides towards diversity and inclusion, but we must acknowledge that the journey ahead of us requires us to learn more, to do more, and to be more to overcome the psychological and even physical safety challenges that are present due to lingering mindsets. We must continue to actively seek to understand and support the vast diversity of those who work amongst us, including foundational areas such as gender and cultural differences. As we strive to continuously improve our culture of safety, it is our goal to also create and build upon a diverse and inclusive environment that learns about and understands the differences of our people, and that values those differences for all the incredible ways that they contribute. The EllisDon core values of integrity and mutual respect welcomes everyone at work and in the community, and EllisDon is intentionally committed to inclusive diversity because we know it's the right thing to do.
All workers are required to maintain a respectful environment, which is free from all forms of harassment and promotes and values diversity. We prohibit any conduct that disrupts or interferes with another person's performance. We have a zero-tolerance policy for any form of discrimination, workplace violence, or harassment. Failure to align with this policy will result in an investigation. If you have experienced any form of discrimination or have witnessed an incident on an EllisDon job site, you can speak with your supervisor and report the incident, speak to your people and culture leader or human resources representative, anonymously call our compliance line, or send an email to hrcompliance@ellisdon.com. Workers who, in good faith, report any such possible violations will not be penalized or disadvantaged.
EllisDon is committed to providing a safe and secure environment for all workers, including vendors, subcontractors, members of the public in our offices and at our work sites. No EllisDon worker or subcontractor shall distribute, possess, consume, or use alcohol, cannabis, or illegal drugs on any EllisDon worksite or possess any drug paraphernalia associated with the use of any drug substance, chemical, or agent which is unlawful. No EllisDon worker or subcontractor shall report to work or be at work under the influence of alcohol or drugs that may or will affect their ability to work safely. This includes prescribed medications. If taken a prescription, medically authorized, or non-prescription drug for which there is a potential unsafe side effect, you have an obligation to report it to your supervisor. Alcohol and drug testing may take place for EllisDon workers after a significant work-related incident as part of an investigation into the circumstance. Testing may also take place whenever EllisDon has reasonable grounds to believe that a person is under the influence of alcohol and/or drugs. Testing procedures are strictly outlined in the Fit for Duty standard and will be consistently enforced. Although EllisDon will not arrange alcohol or drug testing for subcontractors, EllisDon does have the authority to remove subcontract workers from its work sites at any time if there is any reason to believe a person is under the influence. EllisDon has 10 company rules that all workers must adhere to. Follow EllisDon's Health, Safety and Environment program, provincial occupational health and safety legislation, site-specific rules and procedures at all times. Report all incidents, near misses, injuries, unsafe acts and conditions immediately. EllisDon's life-saving rules must be followed at all times. You're expected to be fit for duty and be free of any impairment that may affect your ability to perform work. The use of possession of alcohol, marijuana, and illegal drugs are prohibited. Violence, harassment, horseplay, gambling, and possession of weapons are strictly forbidden. You must wear appropriate personal protective equipment as required by EllisDon Health and Safety Program, Site-Specific Health and Safety Plan, and all other legislative and owner requirements. Theft, vandalism, or any other abuse, misuse of company, client, and/or personal property is prohibited. Smoking, including e-cigarettes and vaping, are only permitted in designated areas. You must be trained appropriately and be competent to perform the assigned work tasks.
EllisDon's life-saving rules. EllisDon has 7 life-saving rules that were developed based on areas of workplace safety where hazards are the highest. Working at heights or fall protection. Never be at or above 1.8 meters or 6 feet in height near openings or leading edges without a proper fall protection system in place. Guarding. Never disable, bypass, modify, or remove any required equipment guarding or safety devices. Never enter an area cordoned off by red danger tape unless authorized. Lockout, tagout, or zero-state energy isolation. Never work on an energized system or equipment without an authorized lockout, tagout in place. Always verify the zero energy state before work begins. Confined space and restricted work areas. Never enter a confined or restricted space unless trained, authorized, and with an approved entry permit and rescue plan. Excavations and trenching. Never access any excavation deeper than 1.2 meters or 4 feet that has not been properly sloped, benched, or shored. All underground facilities or utilities must be located and marked prior to starting excavation. Hoisting and crane operations. Always follow proper safe lifting guidelines and do not walk under suspended loads, elevated excavator buckets, or other similar equipment. Mobile equipment. While operating mobile equipment, wear a seatbelt, obey speed limits, use a spotter when your view is obstructed, and do not use mobile devices.
Consistent disciplinary action may be required for not adhering to regulations, rules, policies, and procedures as they relate to health, safety, and environment. For workers who continually refuse to comply with safety requirements and expectations, progressive disciplinary action will be considered. EllisDon's progressive disciplinary policy has a 4-step process. Verbal warning for a minor infraction to correct the unsafe action or behavior. Written warning for the repetition of an infraction or for a minor to moderate infraction. Suspension for repeated non-compliance or for a moderate to serious infraction. Suspensions with or without pay are dependent on the circumstances and severity. The 4th violation will result in dismissal or termination. Examples involving knowingly engaged in at-risk behavior with a high potential for serious injury or property damage, willful violation of safety rules, procedures, and policies, and willful disregard of EllisDon's organizational requirements and expectations, such as respect in the workplace, violence in the workplace, and being fit for duty. These are general guidelines. EllisDon reserves the right to choose the level of disciplinary action appropriate for the unsafe behavior or action. All EllisDon workers and subcontractors should apply themselves in developing the skills and knowledge necessary to do the job safely and to fulfill the requirements of the Occupational Health and Safety Act and regulations. Every worker should be aware of their skill limitations and not undertake any job that may endanger themselves or another worker's health and/or safety. Prior to and/or during site-specific orientation, EllisDon workers and subcontractors must provide current proof of training for the required legislative training and site and/or task-specific training. In addition, all records of training, including orientation, will be kept on file.
Personal protective equipment is intended to be the last line of defense to protect you. Always check your pre-job safety assessment, job hazard analysis, safe work practice, or safe job procedure to determine the required PPE for the task on hand. Mandatory PPE required on EllisDon projects include CSA ANSI approved or Class E Type 2 hard hats with chin straps, must be worn according to manufacturer specification. Work boots must be CSA approved and at least 6 inches high, in good working condition, and properly laced. The 6-inch slip-on boots are prohibited on EllisDon projects. CSA approved safety glasses, shirts with minimum 4-inch sleeves, and long pants are required to protect against general site conditions and weather. Gloves that meet the level of protection required for the task. You, along with your supervisor, must identify the hazards such as the cut level, temperature, electrical, rough material, sharp objects, and vibration, and choose the appropriate type of hand protection before starting the work. White cotton gloves are prohibited on the job site. Additional PPE requirements such as fall protection, hearing protection, or respiratory protection may be required depending on the work task or project requirements. High visibility vests shall be Class 2 with either an orange or yellow background. Remember, personal protective equipment may degrade over time, so ensure to regularly inspect your PPE for signs of wear and tear.
Every project has a site-specific emergency response plan. Know the plan and your muster points on site. In case of an emergency that requires an evacuation, the EllisDon site team will advise everyone to evacuate and gather at the designated muster point, await attendance, and wait for further directions. The Job Hazard Analysis, or JHA, is a planning document and is used to specify the steps required to complete the task or scope of work and determines the risk that will or may be created by doing the work. The creation of the JHA is completed with a group involving management, supervisors, and workers. The process has the following 6 steps. Step 1, it determines the task, steps, and/or groups of tasks to complete a scope of work. Step 2, it determines the tools, equipment, written procedures, practices and permits, and personal protective equipment required to execute the work. Step 3, it identifies the hazards that are or could be caused by the work. Step 4, ranks the initial pre-control risks caused or potentially caused by the work. Step 5, determines the actions, procedures, controls, and resources required to complete the work. And Step 6, ranks the residual post-control risk caused or potentially caused by the work. A JHA review meeting is held by the supervisor with all personnel involved at the beginning of the particular task. These meetings are designed to prepare the team for tasks ahead by discussing the productivity, health, safety, environmental, and quality requirements. The Pre-Job Safety Assessment, or PSA, assists supervisors and workers to safely accomplish their day-to-day activities and responsibilities where the work is conducted. The PSA is intended to be a routine pre-job review of related tasks, hazards, and safety control measures. This assessment is updated and communicated throughout the day if the job scope changes and new hazards are introduced.
Recognizing hazards is an important skill to help prevent incidents. However, research studies show that we identify less than half of the hazards we face during our workday. This isn't due to complacency or lack of knowledge. Instead, it's because of how we are conditioned to view our environment and how we all see some hazards more easily than others. To improve hazard recognition, EllisDon has adopted the use of the energy wheel. The energy wheel is a visual tool used to help prompt our brains to consider different hazards that may otherwise go unnoticed by associating them with sources of energy. Our ultimate goal is to help prevent the potential of serious injuries and fatalities, known as SIF incidents. When performing a hazard assessment using the energy wheel, start by identifying the job or task that you're assessing and list hazards like you typically would. Once completed, go through each of the energy sources on the energy wheel to help trigger your mind to think of additional hazards you may have missed. The sources of energy on the energy wheel include gravity, motion, mechanical, electrical, sound, pressure, temperature, chemical, radiation, and biological. We should also consider psychosocial factors such as social impacts on our environment that can have on a person or group of people, such as social isolation, fatigue, violence and harassment, or occupational stress.
All incidents and near misses, including injuries, must be reported to EllisDon immediately, no matter how small you think they are. In the event you witness an injury, ensure the area of the accident scene is safe prior to entry. Personal safety first. Assist the injured person. If you're not trained in first aid, call for a first aider. EllisDon maintains a first aid station and has qualified first aiders who are always available to you while you are working. Contact an EllisDon supervisor and advise them of the emergency. Provide as much detail as possible. Location, nature of the emergency, type of the injury, and the number of people involved. Assess and state whether you believe outside assistance may be required. No injured worker shall be moved unless they are at risk of further injury, such as if a worker has fallen, is suspended, and at risk of sustaining suspension trauma. In this case, follow your fall rescue plan. Stabilize and comfort the worker until emergency services arrive. Do not leave the worker unattended. Only emergency services will move the worker. Where required, a post-incident stand-down will be held as soon as possible following the incident. Post-incident stand-downs are intended to bring workers and management together to review factors that contributed to the incident and recommend ways to prevent recurrences. If you are injured at work, you must immediately report it to your supervisor. EllisDon workers must obtain and sign an offer of modified work and medical memo workers level of fitness form from EllisDon and provide it to your treating practitioner for completion. You must inform your doctor that early and safe return to work opportunities are available to you by your employer. Return the completed medical memo before the start of the next shift to your employer. EllisDon has an early and safe return to work program which provides injured workers with modified duties that accommodate any work restrictions up to and including sedentary duties. Modified duties may consist of, but are not limited to, the employee's normal work that has been altered, redesigned, or physically modified, a training opportunity or work which has been specifically designed or designated as a modified work program. It is the site superintendent's responsibility and obligation to accommodate the injured workers' restrictions as prescribed by the treating practitioner.
EllisDon maintains a corporate environmental management system, EMS, to manage the environmental impacts of our operations. Most construction projects will have a Site Environmental Management Plan, or EMP, which identifies specific areas of concern and defines the minimum standards for reducing risk. Common environmental items that may be included in your site EMP are spill and other incident preparedness and response, erosion and sediment controls, site water management, noise and vibration, waste management, wildlife and vegetation concerns. It's important to note, especially on construction sites, that disturbing bird nests or eggs is against the law under Canada's Migration Birds Convention Act. The first offense can result in a fine of $100,000. If you see a bird nest or any other potential environmental impacts, contact your supervisor or EllisDon site HSE coordinator. EllisDon will take appropriate actions to prevent disturbance to the environment.
EllisDon has a responsibility to protect the general public from adverse health and safety conditions that can occur on and around the construction site. The best way to ensure public safety is to erect physical barriers such as fencing, overhead protection, warning signs, etc. Provide distance between the job site and public areas. Maintain housekeeping. Reschedule work to a time when there is no risk to the public. Storage areas should be well organized. Avoid storing items in areas that would block an access path. Always keep your work, lunch, and washroom areas clean, free of debris, slip hazards, and garbage. All workers must keep areas clean. You're required to clean up after yourself each day and dispose of garbage daily in the proper place. Working in the dark is not permitted. If your area is not adequately lit, ask your supervisor for additional lighting. EllisDon provides extinguishers for base building protection. Do not relocate them without authorization. All fire extinguishers must be a minimum required rating, and an inspection must be completed and recorded monthly by a trained person. WHMIS ensures that everyone has access to information about hazardous products used, handled, and stored. Safety data sheets provide instructions for the product's hazards, controls, PPE, cleanup, and first aid responses. SDS should be made readily available on the site. Employers are responsible to give access to the safety data sheets and must also provide training to their workers. Any hazardous products such as, but not limited to, asbestos, silica, lead, should be disclosed to workers if known. Asbestos is a fiber used to strengthen building materials such as insulation or flooring, and silica is a material in concrete products and must be identified prior to disturbing or removing any building materials. Disturbing asbestos and silica can cause it to become airborne and enter your lungs. Your employer is required to advise you of any asbestos and silica containing materials on the project. In the event that you have any concerns or find something suspicious, stop and tell your supervisor, who will inform EllisDon. Interior finishes such as paint, fireproofing, and epoxy-based compounds have the potential to create airborne hazards. Review the safety data sheet to select appropriate personal protective equipment for the task. Tiling operations can create dust hazards from cutting and may disrupt foot traffic if being installed at floor level. Trip hazards can exist at the edge of the flooring. Additional protection will likely be installed to protect the tiles from damage. Some specific floor finishes must be protected from damage during construction. In the event the floor protection becomes a trip hazard, advise your supervisor or EllisDon to ensure the floor protection is maintained.
Construction can cause airborne hazards due to the creation of dust. At certain projects, example health facilities, special enclosures and dust control measures are to be enforced at all times. It is extremely important to minimize airborne particles and microbes, as it can cause complications for people with compromised immune systems. If this applies to your project, an infection control program will be described to you during your orientation session. In the event you have any concerns, advise your supervisor. No internal combustion engines should be operated in an enclosed structure unless there is adequate supply of ventilation due to carbon monoxide exposure. It is the responsibility of the subcontractors to provide proper ventilation for all equipment that produces exhausted gases. Exhaust gases must be directed outdoors if an internal combustion engine is being operated in a tunnel. EllisDon provides fans to increase airflow and create negative air pressure in the work areas where required. Fans should not be moved, unplugged, or altered. Report any concerns to your supervisor if fans are not running as expected. When it comes to flammable liquids, you are only allowed to store a one-day supply of fuel indoors. Refer to the safety data sheet for proper storage of flammable and combustible materials. Keep liquids properly sealed in suitable containers and clearly identified. Rags or cloth contaminated with flammable liquids must be disposed of in CSA-approved waste containers provided by the subcontractor. Waste containers must be properly emptied daily. Compressed gas cylinders pose an explosion hazard, which is why you're not allowed to store cylinders inside a building. Storage facilities and cylinders must comply with legal standards. All cylinders must be secured in an upright position and clearly labeled. Cylinders used inside the building must be connected to a system or represent no more than 1 day's working supply. Subcontractors must provide their own outdoor storage facility in a location approved by EllisDon. If you are working with an open flame or generating sparks, a daily hall work permit is required before the task starts. In addition, a fire extinguisher is also required to be within reach. Ensure all flammable or combustible materials are removed from all hot work areas prior to starting work, and no ignition source is present upon completion. Danger due to signs are to be used as prescribed in the regulations for construction projects. These signs should also be used when using yellow caution tape to identify the hazard in the affected area. Yellow caution tape indicates that there is an increased hazard level, but workers may enter the area being aware of the increased hazard. Red danger tape means that unauthorized workers may not enter the area because it poses a serious hazard. Only the workers doing the work are permitted in the area. For example, loading and laydown areas for mobile cranes shall be enclosed with red tape and shall have danger due to overhead hazard signs posted. The subcontractor is required to provide signs and tape to support its activities. When work is completed in an area that is taped off and the hazard no longer exists, the crew doing the work shall immediately remove the tape.
Underground utilities can be a hidden danger if not located. Prior to the ground being disturbed, you must obtain valid utility locates and identify their location. They are required to be reviewed with everyone involved in the process. Daylighting and adequate sloping must be completed and maintained according to the soil type and condition. Access to the excavation can be by ladder, stairs, and ramp. The edge of the excavation must be protected in the event a worker or vehicle will be near the excavation or if the slope exceeds a 1-to-1 ratio. When an operator's view of their path of travel is obstructed in any direction, including in reverse. Whenever equipment or vehicles cross a public access way, such as a sidewalk or a pathway. Whenever a worker or member of the public may be endangered by the equipment or vehicle or its load. When operating equipment or vehicles in a tight or restricted area. And when working in proximity to energized overhead power lines or excavating within 1 meter of a buried critical utility. The supervisor is responsible to ensure a logistics plan has been developed and reviewed as required. All operators and spotters must be trained and competent and shall jointly establish a method of communication, such as hand signals. The spotter must wear appropriate high visibility garments. If you are involved in crane and hoisting activities, you must be competent and trained. Crane operators must have their safety training with them at all times and complete equipment inspections before use. Always ensure that loads are secure to prevent loose items from becoming detached. Provide notifications to the affected workers to clear the area so the load does not pass overhead. While hoisting equipment is in use, the operator and signaler cannot be performing any other tasks. Loading and laydown areas must be enclosed with red tape and signs indicating danger due to overhead hazard. Step and extension ladders must be CSA or ANSI Grade 1 approved ladders and be used within the restrictions listed on the ladder's labels. Always inspect the ladders before use, and if damaged, remove them from service. When climbing up or down, always face the ladder and maintain 3-point contact, such as 2 hands and 1 foot, or 2 feet and 1 hand. You are not allowed to stand on the first top 2 rungs or the pail shelf. For extension ladders, set the ladder up at the proper angle, 1 foot out for every 4 feet up. When the ladder is set up, there should be at least 6 inches or 15 centimeters behind each rung. When the ladder is fully extended, the sections must overlap at least 90 centimeters or 3 feet. Ladders are for short duration work only. For longer and heavier work, use a scaffold or elevating work platform. Remember, if you are working where there is a risk of falling more than 1.8 meters, 6 feet, this is considered working at heights, and appropriate training and fall protection must be in place. An exception to this is that podium-style ladders can be used with fall protection height requirements that are compliant with your province's local legislation. Podium ladders have a specially designed extra-wide platform at the highest safe standing level and an extended top safety rail which provides an extra point of contact. The manufacturer determines if it is a podium ladder, so check the ladder's user guide or specifications.
Scaffolding must be constructed as per CSA standards and be erected, inspected, dismantled, and modified by a competent person. Scaffold components must be complete and in good repair. All scaffolds must be inspected daily by a trained worker and tagged by a competent person at least every 21 calendar days. As a reminder, fall protection is required anytime you're exposed to a fall hazard of 6 feet or greater, except for podium-style ladders, which can be used with fall protection height requirements that are compliant with local legislation. Before working at heights, a fall protection and rescue plan must be completed and reviewed by all workers involved. All fall protection equipment must be CSA approved and inspected prior to use. You must be trained in selection, use, and inspection and maintenance of all adequate fall protection equipment for your task at hand. You must carry your proof of training while working at heights. And always secure your tools with a tether when working at heights to avoid dropped objects. Anytime you're exposed to a fall of more than 6 feet, a guardrail must be installed. The installation of guardrails is typically the responsibility of the professional that created the fall point. If you remove a guardrail, ensure you review the fall protection plan, you are adequately tied off, and a temporary barrier is put up to warn others to stay away from the area. Before leaving the area for any reason, you must immediately replace the guardrail and secure it properly. Use of bump lines as edge protection must be reviewed by EllisDon's HSE coordinator. An opening in a work surface is a fall hazard. Any worker that creates an opening greater than 4 inches is responsible to cover, secure, identify, and communicate the opening. Every opening requires a guardrail system or protective cover. Covers must be sturdy, properly secured, clearly marked with words such as danger, opening, hole, or a circle marked with an X. Landing platforms are erected and inspected by a competent person and in accordance with the engineer's drawing. Before you use a landing platform, make sure your load does not exceed the weight capacity. Everyone on the platform must wear fall protection equipment when the outside gate is open. After your load is on the platform, materials should be immediately moved away from the loading area to reduce congestion. Make sure safety gates and chains are in place when leaving the area. Reinforcing steel, such as rebar, shall be protected in the form of candy cane ends or using the proper cap anytime it is an impalement hazard. Unless specified, it is the responsibility of the subcontractor that installs the rebar to ensure any exposed ends are adequately protected. Other protruding hazards, such as threaded rods, pipes, and conduit, may also require protection.
Electrical cables on site can pose serious hazards. Always treat electrical cables as live until identified as live or dead through verification by a qualified electrician. It is your responsibility to be aware of the location of all cables, whether it is above or below ground. The site map should indicate the location of the cables. All electrical cables will be connected to a CSA-approved GFCI and should be protected from traffic and sharp edges. You are required to provide proof of training specific to the tools you are using. Additional appropriate personal protective equipment must be used when operating power-actuated tools. Spent and misfired loads are to be placed in a bucket of water and are to be disposed of daily. Do not leave loaded tools or spent cartridges on the floor where they can be run over. Lifting can result in occupational injuries such as overexertion, strains, and sprains. Know what your lifting capacity is and do not attempt to lift greater than 50 pounds. If a greater weight is to be lifted, use mechanical aids or obtain help. All materials must be secured from being moved by adverse weather conditions, such as wind. Use tie-downs to secure all loose material and equipment, and they must be stored no closer than 1.8 meters from an edge. At the end of the day, supervisors must inspect the area to ensure all materials are secure. Adverse weather conditions also include cold and heat stress. People are generally unable to notice when they are being affected by these stressors. It is important to monitor yourself and others for signs of heat or cold-related stress symptoms.
At EllisDon, your safety is our top priority. Everyone has a responsibility to maintain a positive safety culture and keep workplace personnel safe. This is called the internal responsibility system. So, if you see a hazard, fix it or report it to your supervisor immediately. And if you are unsure, stop and ask your supervisor. Together, we can create an accident-free workplace and look forward to going home safely every night. Nothing is more important.